Welcome to the Badass Women in Business podcast. I'm laughing because we just changed our recording platform and I'm so used to counting us down. And this new platform is counting us down. So props for technological improvements. But without further ado, I would love to welcome our guest, Susannah Dillinger. Welcome, Susannah.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with y'all.
We are so excited to have you. And the typical first question is tell everybody who you are.
Well, I am Susannah Dillinger, and business-wise, I am the founder of an agency called Bright Beauty Collective, which specializes in, well, our mission, I should say, is to, quite frankly, change the world through beauty. And we do that by elevating best-in-class conscious beauty brands in retail environments that people might be familiar with, such as Ulta, Sephora, Bluemercury, etc. Outside of business, I am what I had very late in life. I am 45 years old and doing preschool pickup and dealing with all of that and wondering, how does everybody have the energy to do this? This is a young person's game. And also a very, very big advocate for women in business and overcoming the obstacles in our way, including our own self-doubt after being told for so long that this is a hard thing that other people do that you don't do, right? I think we all grow up in that culture. So that is a snapshot of who I am.
I love it. And I feel that there should be a club for moms of toddlers above 40 because I also had my daughter very late in life.
Yes.
Or, very late. It's all boxed up because people have children at different ages. But we are looking at those younger moms and going like, good on you, because I don't know if I have the patience for this.
You need a nap.
Well, the good thing is that you have somebody to take them with. So.
Well, the thing is, I don't know about yours, but mine just doesn't sleep. I mean, I didn't know you had to order one that had that sleep mode. Mine didn't come with the sleep mode. First 2 years of her life, this girl didn't go to sleep until like 11 o'clock at night. My Lord.
Ditto. So I'm assuming you have a girl too.
I do.
Yes. Same thing. And there's no return policy. So there's that.
I missed that she got an extra dosing of cute, thank goodness, so that, she stayed alive during those first 2 years, but she missed that line for sleep, that's for sure.
There you go. We should create a club.
I love it.
Next
I'm
on the
in.
list.
Founding members. Let's go.
Amazing. Well, Susannah, tell us more about why did you want to start your own business?
Oh, such a great question, because I most certainly did not want to start my own business. That was never really the plan. I was a theater major in school, right? I left after 2 years because it's not as if, I show up on stage and say, I have a degree, give me the part. That's not how that works. So I was going to go conquer New York, right? I was going to go be a star. And I quickly became a bartender, right? As one does. And I met a boy. I fell in love and got married and realized pretty quickly that the was not, in cohesion with also being married and wanting to build that life. So one of his really good friends, his wife said to me, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, right? I'm 24 years old. I guess I'm going to go like temp or wait tables and figure out my big girl job. And she said, no. Go work behind a makeup counter while you figure it out. Pays the same and they give you free makeup. And I said, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Like, makeup is not cheap, especially to a 24-year-old starving artist, right? And I said, this sounds too good to be true. So that was going to be my temporary summer job while I found myself. And well, I found myself amongst all those lipsticks and eyeshadows and wonderful women and men. And it was a passion of mine that was brought to life. And before I knew it, there was this whole career in beauty. I was in the corporate side of beauty for almost 17 years. I didn't realize that was a thing, right? That could be a career path. And it was wonderful. And along the way, towards the end, I was traveling 48 weeks out of the year. I was on a plane. And I lived what was considered probably a very, Devil Wears Prada glamorous, the job every girl should want. But yet I was so exhausted, molecularly run down, and just beside myself trying to figure out fertility. That was a big thing for me. Could not get pregnant for years, had hormonal imbalances. I was eating, just trying to figure out what toxicity was happening in my body or inflammation to prevent it. And it went down this rabbit hole on all of a sudden YouTube was serving me because I was watching these things on YouTube about making green smoothies. And as the algorithm does, it served me about what was called at the time green beauty. I've been in beauty at this point by 17 years. I'm like, oh, I know all about that. I know all about beauty. Don't have to tell me I need like beats on my cheeks or whatever. But I listened, a little voice inside me told me to listen, and I discovered what was called endocrine disruptors. And that was definitely a factor for me and what was going on. I had horrible hormonal acne out of nowhere all over the side of my face, my body for months that could not clear. And I fell in love. I fell in love again with now what's called conscious beauty. And this little voice told me that what I was experiencing in corporate, in my retail life, was not healthy. And, we could maybe dive in at a different point of these questions, but I hit a breaking point. I ended up on the floor of a Miami airport bathroom and could not get myself up. I was telling myself, you got, obviously I did get up because I'm here now, but I was like, you were on the floor, girl, of the Miami airport bathroom. Like, we got to get up now. Right. And I got up and I knew something had to change. I knew something had to change. It took me a few months, but my husband came home and one day and said, you've given enough, right? You've given enough of your body. Your body is done. You're mentally done. Who knows what it is, but you need to stop this. And lo and behold, I quit my job that very day with no safety net. And that's a very privileged thing to say as somebody who's married and didn't have any dependents and had somebody else who could, pay our rent. Within 1 month, I was naturally pregnant. That's after having miscarriages. That's after having tried all the things. I mean, I guess they could say you should actually be in the same zip code as your husband to get pregnant, right? That helps. Not being on a plane. But also the stress of what it was to live that corporate life. Like, that was releasing from my body. And also I was healing my body with what I had found I had been, using and exposing myself to. And I started to think, I was looking around and seeing these beautiful brands, smaller brands that were really making some thoughtful, conscious choices, get into big retailers, but then in a blink of an eye, they were gone because they didn't know what even to ask for really when they got in. And you could see it. You could see it in the way they were being positioned in a store, the way they didn't have a sales team, what they were lacking. And I said to a friend, I said, somebody should really think about like helping these brands. Like, that would be a business. Like, they don't know what they're doing yet. In a lot of cases, somebody should go do this. And she's like, hi. Like, you should be the somebody. And I'm like, I went to school for theater, y'all. I left after 2 years. I don't know how to write a business plan. Spoiler alert, I still haven't written a business plan. I have a multi-million-dollar business, never wrote a business plan. And I just started to follow the next right thing, which was, it was a series of inquisitiveness, of wanting to talk to these founders, seeing how I could help them. I reached out to one that was local here in Charleston where I live. I said, I'll sweep your floors. I just want to know what you're doing and how I can help you. And that was my very first client. And it turned within, a very short time into a agency that was never really the plan, but was very clearly what needed to happen. And what I am so happy and thrilled and excited that I believe the universe put me here to do. And that's where we are now.
But before we get into Bright Beauty Collective, because I want to go there, and
Yeah.
you brought it up, so
Yeah.
I'll blame you for my question.
Go
Were
for
you
it.
more of a Miranda, Andy, or Emily in your Devil's Wear
Oh
Prada?
my goodness. Yes. Okay. Listen, it depends who you ask. It depends who you ask. I would say deep down, I feel that almost all of us could say that we are equally Mirandas and Emily's, right? Within our lives. What a part of me that did break when I later on in my corporate career before I left was this, and I'm going to use the word masculine, and I don't mean just necessarily male, but this masculine energy that was really required in this corporate world of cosmetics, of just do not care about anybody, push them to the brink, you must be a certain way. And when I behaved in that manner, I was heavily rewarded. And my nature, if you get to know me and you're a friend of mine, is I am a cheerleader. I am the first person to want to build people up and find a positive outcome. And I was quite frankly at a company after she promoted me. And I thought it was such a great big moment. And she said, now what I need you to do is I need you to kill the cheerleader. I need you to, and I remember this distinctly because it stuck with me. I need you to take the truck, back her up to make sure she is cold and dead, and bury the pom-poms. And you know what I did? I went and I cut my hair, right? I had this like long blonde hair. I cut my hair. I got low lights. I mean, this is like when Devil Wears Prada was playing in the movie theaters, the timing of when this was. I got the pencil skirts. I got the nipped in jackets. And I showed up to my sales meeting with my VP who lived in Florida and I was in Charleston. And she looked at me and she said to me, and she meant this with approval and admiration. She goes, I knew you had this in you. And that started the career of trying to be the Miranda. And it just was so against my nature. And I really do think that that led to so much illness in me. That's a wonderful question.
Yeah. Well, I was just curious because
Yeah.
I like to see myself as more of an Andy, just coming into with
Oh, she's
especially
the best, right?
walking. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, she's the
So your mission with Bright Beauty Collective
Yeah.
is to change the world through beauty.
Yes.
What were you thinking? How were you thinking about changing the world when writing this mission statement?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about my own shock when, again, from the viewpoint of thinking that you know so much about a certain subject matter after a decade and a half or so. And when I started to dive into facts, simple things such as the number 2 polluter to our planet, industry-wise, is beauty. It's only beaten by oil and gas in terms of emissions for off-put plus water contamination, wastewater contamination. It's not wonderful company you want to keep. And nothing against oil and gas, right? Like they get our cars around, but they're not known for like their super green always these days. And I just never thought about it. And that sounds so silly and so naive to not think about like where do all these empty beauty products go? How is all of this made? Where is all this harvested from? But when you start to go down the product life cycle in the conventional beauty world, it's not great, right? It's really not wonderful. So the idea was, well, there's some beautiful brands out here that are doing things with alternate energy, that are using plants that are solar powered, wind powered. One of our clients is wind powered. They are using materials in their outer and inner packaging that are thoughtful, right? There's no perfect solution, yet to packaging, but things that are either biodegradable or using a lot of recycled materials versus virgin materials, repurposed, right? Refillables, etc. As well as really being thoughtful about where they harvest ingredients from. Like over harvesting never even dawned on me when I was in beauty. And this idea that there are communities in other parts of the world that suffer when their crops go out of balance because of overharvest, because of demand for whether it be shea butter or vanilla. Vanilla is a whole topic I'm sure that people in food industry can relate to as well. It's horrible stuff that happens with vanilla. Industries that, or people within the industry that work on reforestation, right? That they're looking at regenerative farming within beauty, right? Like those are very interesting things to me. So the idea of, well, if I can use what I know, which is how to grow a really, in your guys' word, badass sales team, that's what I know how to do. If I know how to do one thing in the world, I know how to do that. So if I can bring these people that I know, selling superstars, give them an ounce of feeling of what it is to make an actual change, which I know they're hungry for, then we can propel these brands to the front. And what will happen, because I also know the competitive nature of this industry, is because real change takes millions and billions of dollars, is the big boys and girls, right? We're not going to call them out. We know who they are, though, in the industry, right? The big boys and girls are going to want their market share back. And so they're going to realize with consumer demand, they now have to come to the table and they have to make some changes. Small, maybe at first, but when we're talking, if they make small changes towards regeneration, reforestation, not having so much output in terms of pollution and energy, the world changes all because of a lipstick. And that's pretty cool.
It's fascinating. What I love is the last piece you just hit on, in the fact that you understand how the industry is affecting our environment, right? As well as our bodies, because you are a direct
Yeah.
person experiencing that.
Yeah.
And that you're not just thinking, well, my company, the way we're going and doing things is going to change the world, but you're using what you do as a fuel to get the large companies to change. That is a really different perspective. And I love it. I love it
That's
because
the
you're like,
plan,
I might
right?
be
That's
small and
the plan.
mighty. Yeah, I might be small and mighty, but we're going to make them be fearful in essence
Yeah.
of us and have to make the change. So
And,
that is
yeah,
beautiful.
I so appreciate you saying that, and for us, we try not to come from the fearful perspective, right?
True.
Our hope is that it's from like, wow, look at this great party that we want to be a part of.
Yeah.
But yes, also like maybe be a little fearful that you're going to lose a little bit
Yeah.
of market share here, big boys and girls. You got to make some changes.
Well, because just like you said, I have clients and people that I talk to that are in their 50s and they're having hormonal issues and weight gain and these different ailments that show up in the
Yeah.
body in such a way. And so typically, luckily today, doctors are now recognizing how important nutrition and the diet is, right?
Mhm.
But I had a client and she was like, do you realize our clothes have recycled plastics in it and
That's
we're
right.
wearing that and it's seeping
Right.
into our skin? Do you
That's right.
recognize what our skincare is like? I never even thought to think about that. And I'm like, yeah, I always resort to coconut oil because I don't know what to
Right.
trust, right? I'm like, it's natural. I don't know if it's the best source, but it's great to have that exposure.
Yeah.
I'd love to find out, like, what are the key measures for you from a
Mm.
brand perspective that allows you to choose them to align with and to go promote?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you can imagine, we have a really in-depth review of any brand that we bring on because our purpose, right, is to elevate best in class. We could sit here and say, we're going to take on everybody who wants to change the world, who's doing better things, who's making great choices. But if the consumer doesn't love the product, it's not going to work, right? It's not going to grab attention because at the end of the day, when you go to buy a beauty product or a skincare product or personal care, like you want it to actually do what you're buying it for, right? You want clean hair with your shampoo. You want to not smell with your deodorant. There's some basic lines in here, but you also want it to be something that feels amazing. So our number one thing is it an amazing product? We start right there. It's got to be a best in class product. And then we review everything. So we look at ingredients. We have a list. We're inspired by the retailer Credo, has a really wonderful guideline of ingredients that they look to keep out of their product. They've done a ton of amazing research into this, and we follow them as well. We have a couple additional ones we use in there just from my own research and my own experience. For example, fragrance for us is a non-starter. There's so many allergens that can be related to fragrance in beauty products that develop, as you said, Christy, later in life, but also here in the States, the word fragrance is protected due to proprietary information, right? They're saying you don't knock off our fragrance, our special secret blend. However, you can put in hundreds and hundreds of ingredients under the banner of fragrance and not have to disclose it. So if people do have some, issues or allergies, they're not able to really be transparently read an ingredient list. So for us, that's a non-starter. Fragrances are also known to be hormonal disruptors and can be the cause of, some of those imbalances women and men even face in life. So ingredients is where we start, is where we go next. And then we also look at packaging. We don't do any virgin plastics, of course. We look for really conscious, thoughtful approaches to packaging and having an understanding of where they are with their packaging and where they're going. So a brand to say, hey, we're all refillable. Well, what does your refill look like, right? Is it a refillable plastic? because there's stats there too, like that's not perfect. I think something has to be refilled at least 4 times for it to make an impact. So there's definitely that. And then lastly is, does a brand give back, right? So we actually look for a brand to have a meaningful contribution. And that can be different for each brand. There's some of our brands work with partners like Buy One, Give One that build schools and communities abroad. There's brands here in the States that do reforestation. There's brands that support domestic violence awareness in their home communities. We look for brands who are making a difference within their community because we also think that that is a socially responsible thing to do, as we do as well.
And to give you some props around that, your company also gives back,
We do.
right?
We have a wonderful charity called One World Health. They do all the amazing work. We're just a happy sponsor and supporter of that. And they had a person from them named Missy Parker reached out to us that I knew here in Charleston and told me about the big needs in Uganda around maternal care and infant care. The average first age that somebody gives birth in Uganda is very, 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 very young. We're talking 12 to 13 years old. So by the time a woman in Uganda is in her 30s, she could have, 7, 8 children at home, right? And they're making very low wages. And if there's any type of natal care needed, it's so prohibitively expensive that they are making the real choice between, do I feed my children at home or do I save my new baby? And the choice is very often that it's unfathomable to say out loud, but they have to let their baby die to save their other children. And it's just, it's absolutely unfathomable to think that any woman would have to do that. And so when that was brought to us that we could help to, underwrite the first ever neonatal center for way lower than you would think, right? Like we're talking just the money goes so far there. It was it was like just absolutely a no-brainer. And then just for me personally, once I was like, oh, well, this is where our money is going, we're donating a percentage of our profits. I was like, everybody move out of our way. We are about to go dominate because this lipstick is a saved baby, y'all. Like, move out the way. We're here to take over.
We'll requote you because you said earlier the world changes just because of a lipstick. So once again,
Yeah.
that's another application of those words. So
Thanks
love
for that.
that.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the beginning. So every business starts with a vision. And I'd love to know, like, when you were conceptualizing this
Mhm.
Bright Beauty Collective, what was your vision then? And did it materialize today?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So we are 2.5 years young. It feels like we are 10 years, right, from where I was when I first had the idea. And a large part of the original vision was we use the word collective. I use the word collective intentionally in the naming of the agency. It was to also create a place where founders could come together, talk about their obstacles, talk about their challenges, and share resources, right? That we are, stronger as a sum than we are as a part. And as we grew and took on, and this is, very transparent, right? As we took on larger clients, that feeling of wanting to share resources became a little bit trickier because all of a sudden we're talking about millions of dollars. We're talking about boards. We're talking about competitors, right? And navigating that for a minute became a different feeling. Intentionally, Aggie, to your point, moving back towards that original vision for internally in our operations. How can we create that sense of community amongst our brand and our founders, even the ones who are doing a staggering amount of revenue, right? And winning all of these awards, we still know that they are all asking the same questions, that the same issues are plaguing them, that a lot of them feel very alone, and that there should be a shared space for them to be able to support each other. And we're dipping our toe in that water, and we've had incredible success this season already by just doing some co-branded events in retailers where we take, a smaller brand like a sun care brand, and we paired them with one of our brands that's a publicly traded brand. right? And they, did a Instagram thing together. They did an in-store appearance with the founders together. And wouldn't you know that the larger brand, right, the publicly traded brand came back to us and were like, that was amazing. Thank you so much for that. We love this other brand. They now have their own relationship. They have their own calls. They have, and we want to build more of that. So we're looking at how those experiences can come to life in-person collaborations. And I would stay tuned for more of that in 2024 and what that will look like into 2025 to get back to that original vision.
I love that businesses have to evolve, right? And the way it goes may or may not be the direct vision that you had, but the fact that you're holding that vision and you're circling back to it and going, okay, now that we have our foundation built, how do we go and explore our vision deeper? So I love that. And for any business owners or founders listening to this, sometimes we do feel like we lose our purpose along the way, and you always have the opportunity to course correct and get back to where you were, for sure. I want to dive in a little bit more around, obviously you've worked in the corporate world.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that you had a team that you led before.
Yes.
But
yes.
what is it like being responsible, hiring and leading your own team that is 100% reliant on you?
Yeah. Oh, it's a whole new world, right? It's very, very different when they are your own team, truly. And it's wonderful, but it's also wonderfully crippling some days as a founder, to be transparent. I think it's very easy to sit here and be like, it's amazing. Everything is perfect. This was all so fun. No, I have mental breakdowns like on the weekly. It's really, really a big responsibility to think about. We have right now 137 field team members here in the US, Canada, and even France. And then we also now have 13 full-time executive, senior leaderships as well. And so I look at that, I'm like, there's families that every decision I make affects. And there were times when I was just going through payroll issues. And one of my worst breakdowns was on the phone with a payroll company who had talked me into switching over to them, told me how great my life was going to be going over to them. Everything was going to be roses. And literally came down to the hour that I had to press the button to approve the payroll so everybody was paid on time for that week, and they hadn't set something up correctly, and they quite literally shrugged their shoulders and well, they'll be paid Monday. And I lost it. And I just said, you do not understand. This is groceries. This is rent. This is birthday presents. This doesn't wait till Monday, right? That's not even an option. And I was literally rocking in my chair because they wouldn't fix it for me. And they're one of the largest payroll companies in the country. And I did the only thing I knew how to do. And I called the company I was leaving, and I called their retention manager, and I said, you have literally 60 minutes. If you can pay my entire company in 60 minutes, because they typically had a 3 to 5 day hold on my processing, which is one of the reasons why I left. And I said, I'll stay. And do you know my entire company was paid in 60 minutes? Because I could not, it literally stopped me dead in my tracks to think about them not being paid. And that's just a different feeling than if you're, just a senior manager and somebody calls you at a company and says, hey, we had a payroll processing hiccup, and you have to tell your team, you're like, okay, hey team, corporate had a payroll problem. No, it's very different when it's you, right?
That kind of highlights my beef with a lot of sales-based organizations that overpromise on the front and completely smack down, underdeliver on the back end.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to name that payroll processing, although I really want to know who that is. I know.
It's the other.
Which is why we won't be doing any bad publicity on this podcast.
I will tell you, the woman who did it for me, she needs a raise. She needs a raise. She's a hero.
Agreed. Well, hopefully she listens, and or you can send her that podcast and be like, "Hey, I gave you a shout out."
There you go.
I think that not having enough money to support your team is probably one of the many things that business owners don't think about when going into business, because I don't think that a single business owner goes into business and says, I am going to employ people. to help me
Right.
run this business. I think a lot of business owners go into business and say, I can do it all.
Right.
So, yeah, that's more power to you for having gone through that experience and remained unscathed on the back
Mm.
end, because that's
I think I
nightmare.
probably have the ulcer to name after that one. But I mean, to your point, though, it taught me a lesson that, I'm sure if I'd gone to business school, I would have learned earlier, which is a thing called cash reserves, right? But when you're, operating a company, it's very hard to build up as you can imagine, to run a field, right? It's quite expensive, and we rely on very quickly getting our people paid. And, it's something that it taught me very quickly. It's like we have to have the ability to wire people like overnight if this were to ever happen, because even the best payroll company can fail.
Right. And this happened after the Miami airport floor episode,
Right,
correct?
right, right. Yeah,
Okay.
Miami Airport was when I was
Just
still in corporate beauty.
just making sure everybody
Not
knows
ended
that.
up on another bathroom floor. Not yet. May I never.
I want to go back to something you mentioned a couple times in the beginning of our call, is listening to that little voice inside of you. You already talked about how being in corporate America forces you, and I personally have experienced this as well, to live in your masculine energy versus your feminine. And when I think of that little voice inside of me, it's truly my feminine that I typically in business, we are taught to not listen to,
Yeah.
is a piece that it sounds like you're fully integrating that into yourself now and having more of a balance between that feminine and masculine energy. So,
Yeah.
how did you revive that little voice inside of you
Mm.
and actually say yes to it
Yeah.
and trust it?
Yeah, right. I love that. I love that question. And you're right. I mean, I do agree with you that, at least in my experience in corporate, it does come from a very masculine energy place of, that's what is rewarded. And it makes sense, right? I mean, not to get all on a tangent, but capitalism is very patriarchally based, right? Matriarch society is more of creation, right? More of a circular idea, whereas a patriarchal society is very much of a pyramid, right? And we can go back in history and see that. And that's why I think these tenets are ingrained in us, right? It's not a conscious thing we make, it's just how it currently operates. So it was a lot of intentionality of saying to myself, when you were here in corporate, you always said, well, if I was ever in charge, I would make it this policy. So now I'm in charge. So now I have to make this my policy. A small example of that I had to like remind myself of a lot of times too, because to backtrack, we can slip back into it, that masculine mode, so easily, I believe, when you're a high performer from corporate, because it's just second nature, right? So if your business starts going and booming and taking off, you're like push, 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 right? It's just what you do. And I think you have to be very conscious and very intentional. Is this healthy? Is this the right thing? Or do we need to, slow this process down a little bit more? And one of those, a small thing that I did was we put in a menstrual leave policy. And so many of my mentors and colleagues were like, you're insane. What are you doing? Everybody's going to take advantage of this. And then other people said, well, this is silly, because another thing we have is we do have, some very generous PTO for our full-time people. That was very intentional as well. They're like, you already have all this PTO time. You don't need to name a menstrual leave. I said, okay, I'm going to correct you on two things. You 100% need to name a menstrual leave policy, that every month that this is a thing. We have 2 extra days, because even if you have unlimited PTO, and ladies, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you have cramps, you're not shooting an email and saying I'm taking today off.
Nope.
Even if you have unlimited PTO, because we have been conditioned that you work through it. It doesn't matter if you're leaving claw marks in your wall at night because your cramps are so bad. You have figured out since the age of 14 or 15 how to move on through life, because that's what you've been conditioned to. But my thought was that if you actually have it in a handbook and see it in writing, that this is a thing we have, then it's meant to be taken, right? Like this isn't, we're not going to say any crazy thing. And another thing is, I always joked at the beginning that our initials for Bright Beauty Collective, BBC, secretly stood for babies before cosmetics because it was three of us when I started out, and all three of us had children under the ages of 2. And I would have flop sweat thinking about getting on a Zoom call with a potential client with my kid at home, right? Because she wasn't in school yet. And then I caught myself and I'm like, I am not building that company. I am building the company where you see our children, you hear our dogs bark, you see our lives, and we are no longer apologizing for it because we want the type of client here that appreciates that and understands that and isn't going to be like, what is that small human doing suckling on your breast? Right? Well, I mean, there were several times where I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to just lift up my camera real quick because my daughter was breastfeeding. And I let my team know very quickly, like, please don't apologize. We have people who have multi-generational families living at home. Don't apologize if you have the grandmother in the background. Don't apologize if your dog's barking. Don't apologize if your kid is at home sick and for some reason you still think you need to Zoom, by all means. But if you need to go check his temperature, and to build that culture was really, really, and is still very important for me. I remember after I had my daughter and was working and building this, thinking about all the times that I had a team back in corporate who came to work when their kid was sick, and I would be annoyed that they were late. Like, full transparency. I remember that feeling of like, ugh, I just need them to like get to work on time. Like, can't they get their sitter there? And that is not who I am, and that is not my nature, but I was just so conditioned to being so concerned with the output of that person, that them as a whole, them as a mother, and the actual insane struggle they must have had at the feeling of having to leave their child to show up to this job. I couldn't imagine it. And I actually called one of my former people, right, that I'm friends with, and I said, I am so sorry. I did not get it. And I messed up. And all we can do is better, right?
So
First,
first
it
of
takes
all,
one to know one.
yeah. Well, to me, I have said for ages, you make me so happy that you actually have a menstrual leave policy. And I was
Oh,
like, I've never read the book, but it's called The Red Tent. And
good. Oh, I don't
so
have this one.
back in when tribes and Native Americans,
Mm,
whenever women were menstruating, they could all go into the tent and be there and support each other,
mm,
and they weren't expected to do the other duties.
I
And I
love
just
that.
always thought, man, why do we not honor this anymore? So I love that you're honoring that. Number one. Number two, I can relate to you in that corporate setting of not having kids and having these expectations. But I always saw it in the other light because
Mm,
I don't have kids. I chose not
mm,
to.
mhm.
And I always felt, well, because they have a kid, they can go. They have a reason to
Oh,
leave.
they get to leave early.
And I
Yeah,
felt the guilt of, I don't
yeah.
have a kid to go home and take care of. I guess I have to pick up the slack
Mm,
and work the extra hours. So it's interesting how it
mm.
does, affect everybody in different ways.
It does. It's so interesting that you brought that up. When we were working on the core values of the company and really trying to name very clearly what those are and what we stood for, I remember I was with our chief strategy officer and I was naming like, we're family centered, right? Or we're this. And he looked at me, and he's someone who also, chose not to have children with his wonderful wife. And he looked at me, he said, and he's a friend, and he said, that does nothing for me. He said, knowing, he said, if I join your company, you say, well, we're family centered. He named something similar to you, that means that, okay, well, so-and-so gets to leave early because they have a kids thing. And he said, how would this feel for somebody who's maybe estranged from their parents or somebody who doesn't have children? And we named it something completely different, which was, we believe in a life in harmony, whatever that life is to you. Right. So for you, if your life in harmony is that you need to be able to leave for your own self at a certain time of day, right? We need to value and honor that. Same as we would because this person is leaving for their reason, which might be their child, that one cannot outweigh the other.
It's beautiful.
You are slowly but rapidly becoming an entrepreneurial hero of mine because
Oh,
you are no, but seriously,
Yeah.
you're building this company with concepts and policies that still a lot of women who are business owners shy away from, because I think we live in a culture, and going back to the patriarchy, where productivity and performance are aligned with hours worked. And I completely disagree with that concept, because to me, it's like, if you're performant and you manage to do something in 2 hours that another person is capable of doing in 8 hours, then why should you be punished for that?
Amen. And I just want to say amen over and over. And quite frankly, the best people are the ones who can do it faster because they have the experience, right, to get it done faster. And it's a push-pull with me, right? Because I run an agency. It's very similar to a law firm. We bill in hours done in a field. So this sense of like, we have to push and have these hours in, and we have to make sure that we're hitting this KPI metric. What does it look like to build value to a client that is not related to billable? And what is it to have people on our team that are not related to billable? And what if everybody on our team is something more than billable? And how do you balance that while still being fiscally responsible for yourself as a company and also your clients and their spend, right? Because again, it's still very much a patriarchal society that wants to see output, right? Or else we're not going to have any clients and we're not going to change the world. So I cannot be the entrepreneur hero here yet because I have not figured out the key. I just know that it needs to be figured out.
Right, but you've set a strong foundation, and
Thank you,
you're delving into things that,
yeah.
I mean, menstrual leave policy, that's a badass benefit.
Thank you.
Know, getting back on the team. And I'm fortunate enough for that to have never prevented me from being productive, but I have friends and I have family members who are completely and utterly paralyzed.
Yeah.
And for them to be, and my wife who works in HR, which is something that happened not too long ago, a person kept calling out every single time she was in that time of the month because she just couldn't function. And she got penalized for it because, you no show. Nobody's there to help you out, but it's something that a lot more company owners in the corporate space and the entrepreneurial space need to be a little bit more aware of for all humankind. I think,
all humankind. Yes. I mean, if only men went through it, they would have figured this out a long time ago because they would not be working with those cramps, honey. They would not. The government everything would shut down once a month. They would all be shut down.
Yes. So we've talked about, we went around the world with your story. I'd love to know, as we wrap up, what's the future of BBC?
The future is bright. That much I know for
No
sure.
doubt.
The future is bright. I remain very, very focused on exactly our mission, which is how else can we build community? How can we change the world? How can we serve more clients? How can we create a culture that's actually serving our employees the most? And we're looking at things, what are other offerings? What are other ways that we can do that? I'm very interested in the retail space right now of what hyper-local community building looks like. I believe that with AI and digital, the customer is becoming very tiresome and weary of most DTC experiences. And I think they're really looking, especially in the beauty space, on how to engage with community, how to have interactive events in real life. And we're doing some pretty cool things in that space. We did one just a couple weeks ago at a gorgeous farm-to-table restaurant in New York City called Gotham, along with a great organization called Black Girl Rocks, on giving back to community. And it was a fun night of food and DJ and beauty and a beautiful turnout. And we're looking at how to scale those types of events that are outside of a traditional retail space across the country, and really meeting consumers where they are, not tied to a brick and mortar. So that's
amazing.
And world domination. But beyond that, nothing else.
Nothing else.
Especially that.
Yeah. Especially that.
Well, if you ever have a venue that you do something like that here in Colorado, Aggie and I are based in Colorado, keep us posted because that sounds amazing.
Well, now I have a reason to go have my team find
Yes,
one. That would be so fun.
that
Yes.
would be fun. We have a lot of farms to table here. So,
Yes.
well, Susanna, this has been, wow, I have to say, probably one of my favorite conversations.
Oh
I
my gosh.
love,
Thank you, ladies.
truthfully, the brightness that you are shining in the world.
Thank you.
You got there by a way of not what you thought.
Yeah.
And you started out saying, I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur and
Right.
owning my own company. But you're living proof that if you have a mission and a vision that is impactful and can create change,
Yeah.
that everything else will fall in place. So thank you for being courageous and having a mission and vision that not only hopefully more and more people will be able to find you, but that you can
Thank you.
actually continue to create that impact. And I love that you give back to that one world health. That's pretty cool. So
Thank you so much, ladies. This
yeah,
was so fun to talk to both of you. You were so wonderful, and it made me feel so warm and fuzzy. So thank you so
thank
much for
you.
being bright spot in my day and helping me to stay centered on our mission. It's very nice.
Yes. And if
It's
anyone wants to find you, either come work
Yes.
for you or partner with you,
Please,
how do they
please.
find
We are
you?
always hiring as we grow. So we are on Instagram at Bright Beauty Collective, and our website is the same, Bright.
excellent, Susannah. It was a pleasure. And we hope to see you again on Act 2 or 3 of wherever you go next.
Count on it. Yeah. I'd love
All
that.
right.
Awesome.
Bye, ladies.
Thank
Bye.
you. Have a great day.